warm reception. In my presentation for you all today, I will be speaking on the perception of military leadership related to leadership in the business world. The military has been at the forefront in the study of leadership for decades. Generally, American citizens have highly valued the military and the application of leadership in that time. This observation is backed by research and surveying and can be looked at statistically. In fact, since 1973, Americans have ranked the military in terms of confidence in public or private institutions' leadership competence as the first or second most dependable institution every year since. In regard to percentages, the percentage of Americans who voice their confidence in the military as the most dependent institution regarding leadership capability has been upwards of 80%. By comparison, large corporations in the business world have received a vote by Americans in percentages that have remained under 20% during that time. Furthermore, this confidence in active military has extended to former military personnel in the business world. Former military personnel currently make up around 3% of the US population. In the current makeup of leadership positions in the business world, nearly 9% of CEOs in S&P 500 companies are veterans. Personally, I've had peers in my own life that I've seen make great transformations and great leaps in their personal development. This has happened not only at the personal level, but at a leadership level as well. They have done so through the military and its discipline. So, with that being said, now we must investigate what characteristics that the military focuses on and how they apply to leadership and the development of leaders in the chain of command. With characteristics and skills such as discipline, principle, and ownership that the military tree is built upon, it provides a great blueprint when looking at the building and development of leaders. The figures for the current landscape of the corporate world are simply not getting any younger. This means that the younger generation of businessmen and women will be taking control of leadership positions in the business world soon. So, what is the purpose of studying military leadership and applying these findings to business? I have formulated the opinion that the military's principles of leadership should be applied in the business world more to create better leaders, and that also the percentage of Americans that have confidence in corporations would increase. Pictured from left to right, we have Jocko Willink, Jeremiah J.P. Donnell, and Leif Badman. Looking at these men, who are all former Navy SEALs, what do you see in terms of their appearance? How would you describe what kind of leader you would imagine them to be? Now, take those preconceived notions that you have of the former Navy SEALs and look at your common businessmen that hold positions of leadership. Enter Michael Scott. Clearly, at least I hope, you all have recognized the lighthearted example of what your average businessman looks like that I have presented. Regardless of the joking nature of my example, there's a clear distinction in what the perception of the prospective leaders is through the eyes of the average person. The military instills the foundation of principle, discipline, and ownership right from the very beginning. Throughout their military careers, leaders such as officers, team leaders, commanders, and SEAL instructors exhibit the pinnacle of what military leadership represents and looks like. They have built their strong personal skill sets on foundations of strength, courage, decisiveness, execution, dependability, knowledge, and lastly, tact. These foundations are fantastic examples of characteristics that are the makeup of a great leader. This is true within the military. It is true also within business and it is true within our personal lives as well. Servicemen of this status are not, quote unquote, born into the military with all of these skills and characteristics, having been already mastered. They're transformed, however, through rigorous training, heavy influence from their chain of command, and oftentimes through the terror of war. Despite the focus on military personnel and leadership positions that I have just highlighted, leadership is not limited to only those officers and commanders, but extends throughout the entirety of the operations teams. No single military operation is carried out by one serviceman in any of the branches of the military. Every operation is carried out by a team, a squadron, or a special unit. What separates the military work environment from the corporate environment is the danger and tragedy of war. There is no guarantee on any given day for these men and women that they will come back alive from their operations. With that being said, there is no telling when the designated leader can be taken out of the action. The result of this is that the members of these teams must be capable of leading if the original leader is no longer able to do so. Our military is so effective in carrying out their mission due to their shared principle and practice discipline. In the face of high pressure and high-stakes situations, they prove to be adaptive and to be able to continue as effective units. Now, how is this adaptive leadership amongst the team structured, and what does it look like? For each operation, there are hours of careful planning, discussion with operative teams, and room for strategical input that are put in to formulate a plan. The plan's objective is determined by those in leadership positions in the military, such as the aforementioned officers, commanders, and team leaders. The goal, however, is not determined by the subordinates. This decisiveness is not as exclusive to leadership positions on the battlefield. Enters the term commander's intent. Commander's intent states that subordinates have discretion to issue orders for their areas of operation, as long as those orders are aligned with the intent of their commander. Moving down the chain of command, orders evolve in keeping with the environment. This means that even the lowest ranking member of the team has the capability to issue commands on the battlefield in order to lead their teammates amidst the destruction and chaos of the battle. For example, a commander is leading his rifle company. They are ordered to secure a neighborhood. He sets out and assigns particular blocks to each platoon in his company. The lieutenant commanding the platoon then determines how to secure his assigned blocks, ordering each of the three 13-man rifle squads in his platoon to clear a particular group of buildings. Each squad leader, in turn, issues orders to 3 or 4 teams made up of a few different men. These men are leaders who are delegated from their chain of command, despite the fact that they do not hold a leadership position. The military utilizes this structure of leadership because of its effectiveness in their operations. It allows for the competent subordinates within these teams and operative units to make decisions within their roles and lead their teammates to victory and the avoidance of tragedy in war. All of this is possible because you share the same values as a military team member. The leaders delegate their subordinates and are capable and have their own skill sets and capabilities that they bring to the table. This dynamic can be applied in leadership and business. Let's say you're a project manager with a team of subordinates who all have different skill sets that they bring to the table. In your position as a project manager, You are the determinant of the overall plan and what the goals and future direction should be. You are essentially formatting the commander's intent for your team. The introduction of the plan occurs. Your subordinates should have the opportunity for input considering their different skill sets and expertise and suggest alterations to your plan. As often as possible, if you delegate leadership responsibility, it can provide positive results in business. For example, let's say that your plan is seen to have a 90% solution to the problem. As you introduce your plan, one of the subordinates comes to you with a plan that they believe in for part of the project and only has an 80% chance of solving the solution. Now, whose plan are you to go with? The answer may be unexpected. The military logic says to go with the 80% subordinate plan. Why? You go with your competent subordinate's plan because they are also capable of being a leader for their part in the project. They will execute their plan with conviction, and their expertise in their job will be obvious in their execution. With that being said, say that your plan has the same 90% solution. Now you have a subordinate that comes to you with a 70% plan. What do? You guessed it. Go with the subordinate's plan again. But this time, provide some strategic editing for his plan that you have formulated. Listen to their plan intently and have a respectful suggestion and provide direction. They will still execute the plan accordingly with the same conviction as if they had the 80% solution idea originally, because of their pride in their work. Your plan as a leader will lead to more victories by delegating the work to your people. This especially works when your team shares their values and puts emphasis on their work. Just like in military operations, you will find success. You will lead your team to victory. In the process, you will develop your team to be a leader in their role. Now, these values and pride in their work are created through ownership. There is a military story that will introduce the idea of ownership. Ownership of their work and role in the workplace can lead to more success for you as a leader. The story that I'm going to be telling comes from Jocko Willink himself. He was a Navy SEAL and a Navy SEAL instructor at the end of his career. This one specific situation taught him about ownership as a leader. In spring of 2006 in Iraq, American soldiers were fighting the insurgency comprised of terrorists. On this day, a tragic event occurred. A time of chaos and high-pressure situation ensued. On this day, there were many different units scattered throughout the city. Amidst the chaos, there was a firefight, a brutal firefight. With the confusion, the unthinkable occurred. This firefight was not against the insurgency. It was not against the sworn enemy that they had been fighting throughout the city for weeks. Unfortunately, it was friendly forces firing upon friendly forces. The result of this firefight was one friendly Iraqi soldier who was killed. Many other American military members were injured when it was all said and done. It was an unthinkable and unbelievable tragedy that occurred this day. Leadership had to be at the forefront of the explanation. There was some fault to be administered. News of the friendly firefight traveled fast. Jocko was told after the operation that investigators and high commanding officers were inbound to his position, and that he would have to prepare a debrief for them that explained the events of the day. His leadership at this point was in question as a commander, not only by the commanding officers, but also the members of his team and the other teams that he was working alongside. This debrief was not going to occur without some sort of discipline and some sort of blame to be administered. As Willink prepared the debrief, he had to evaluate the failure and execution of the plan. He pointed out what went wrong in every single aspect. Who was at fault for what mistakes, and who had to take the blame, and who was going to be exposed. He pondered the answers to these questions that he was about to present to the investigator and high commanding officers that were coming in. In a moment of sudden realization, he noticed that there was only one person that could take the blame for this tragedy. As he entered the room, he prepared a question for the men. Whose fault was this in the events of this day? As he stood in front of his team and the other teams that were involved, members of this team came forward. One at a time, they explained how it was exactly that it was their fault for the failure of the execution of the plan. One soldier claimed that it was his fault. He said that he didn't have control over the Iraqi soldiers that he was commanding. Jocko stood and replied, "No, this was not your fault." Another man came forward and took responsibility for not raiding the positions over quickly enough to alert the other teams of their positions. Once again, Jocko stood in front of the room and said, "No, this was not your fault either." Soldier after soldier came forward and presented how they had failed in their responsibilities. After a few minutes of self-proclaimed blame that had just occurred, Jocko Willink stopped them. He looked them in the faces. He said, "It was not your fault, or yours, or yours, or yours. The person to blame for the actions that took place today and the tragedy that occurred was me. I am your commander, your leader, the person who has the experience to prevent these types of situations from happening." Now, in this instance, as the leader, he took ownership. It is so easy for a leader to transfer blame to their subordinates. The officers expected to hear the excuses from the debrief and blame being passed around. They had not. Instead, it was ownership of responsibility. Jocko expected Foley to be fired and reprimanded for the failure of execution. Instead, he was kept in his place. He provided answers to how things were going to change, what needed to be done better. He took ownership of the solution as well. Now, how would you apply this story to business? Ownership is yet another trait of a great leader in any circumstance. There are high-stakes problems and situations that people face in business, just like on the battlefield. The leader must be able to take ownership through their successes. However, it is even more important to take ownership in your failures. Subordinates expect to have the blame transferred to them. When their leader takes ownership, it leaves an impact. Subordinates begin their viewer in a higher light. It also provides them with the courage and the dedication to take ownership in their own positions and their own responsibilities. Every team is comprised of parts that make up the whole. By taking ownership, the quality of the work that is being done increases. The successes begin to pile up. The feelings of importance and impact are radiant amongst members of the team. The leader exhibits the ability to take ownership of their problems and their mission, and the company's mission as well. Subordinates now know that their leader is dependable. This is of the utmost importance for the successes of the team. The subordinates now have taken ownership of their individual projects and their individual work. They have found new drive and new determination to find personal success. This personal success that they find will transfer to the personal success of the team. The area that the leader must take another level of ownership in comparison to their subordinates, however, is ownership of the solution and of direction. The leader is looked to for answers, for suggestions, and different ways of thinking that lead to the realization of the goal. So I say to you, take ownership of your life as a leader. Take ownership not only in the successes, but take ownership of the failures and your shortcomings. This will leave an impact. It creates dependable leadership within your team as well. Finally, take ownership of the solution. Be the one with the answers. Take on the responsibility of the resolution. Have the passion and the character to accept responsibility for all aspects of the job, through the good times and the bad. Do so, and you will lead others to success, and you will find a winning culture.